The Lake District, also commonly known as the Lakes or Lakeland, is a mountainous region in northwest England. A popular holiday destination, it is famous not only for its lakes, forests and mountains, but also for its associations with the early 19th century poetry and writings of William Wordsworth and the other lake poets. Historically shared by the counties of Cumberland, Westmorland and Lancashire, the Lake District now lies entirely within the modern county of Cumbria. All the land in England higher than 3,000 feet above sea level lies within the national park, including Scafell Pike, the highest mountain in England. It also contains the deepest and longest lakes in England, Wastwater and Windermere, respectively. Lake District National Park. The Lake District National Park includes nearly all of the Lake District, though the town of Kendal and the Lakeland peninsulas are currently outside the park boundary. The area, which was designated a national park on May 9, 1951, is the most visited national park in the United Kingdom with 15.8 million annual visitors and more than 23 million annual day visits, the largest of the 13 national parks in England and Wales, and the second largest in the UK after the Cairngorms. Its aim is to protect the landscape by restricting unwelcome change by industry or commerce. Most of the land in the park is in private ownership. The National Trust owns about a quarter of the total area, United Utilities owns 8% and 3.9% belongs to the Lake District National Park Authority. The National Park Authority is based at offices in Kendal. It runs a visitor centre on Windermere at a former country house called Brockhole, Coniston Boating Centre and Information Centres. In common with all other national parks in England, there is no restriction on entry to, or movement within the park along public routes, but access to cultivated land is usually restricted to public footpaths, bridleways and byways. Much of the uncultivated land is statutory open access rights, which cover around 50% of the park. The lakes and mountains combine to form impressive scenery. Farmland and settlement add aesthetic value to the natural scenery with an ecology modified by human influence for millennia and including important wildlife habitats. The Lake District has failed to be approved as a Natural World Heritage Site, because of human activities, such as commercial forestry, which have adversely impacted the park's assessment. Another bid is being prepared for World Heritage status, this time in the category of cultural landscape. Proposed extension to National Park. In December 2009, Natural England proposed extending the national park in the direction of the Yorkshire Dales National Park. This would include land of high landscape value in the Lune Valley. The proposal was opposed by Cumbria County Council, who said it would lead to less democratic control and would make local housing less affordable. A public inquiry is being held into the proposals, which will require a decision by the Secretary of State. Human geography, general. The precise extent of the Lake District was not defined traditionally, but is slightly larger than that of the national park, the total area of which is about 885 square miles. The park extends just over 32 miles from east to west and nearly 40 miles from north to south, with areas such as the Lake District peninsulas to the south lying outside the national park. Settlement. The Lake District is one of the most highly populated national parks. There are, however, only a handful of major settlements within this mountainous area, the towns of Keswick, Windermere, Ambleside, and Bowness-on-Windermere being the four largest. Significant towns immediately outside the boundary of the national park include Barrow and Furness, Kendal, Ulverston, Cockermouth, Penrith, and Grange-over-Sands. Each of these has important economic links with the area. Villages such as Coniston, Threlkeld, Gulmridding, Pooley Bridge, Broughton-in-Furness, Gressmere, Newby Bridge, Staveley, Lindale, Gosforth and Hawkshead act as more local centres. The economies of almost all are intimately linked with tourism. Beyond these are a scatter of hamlets and innumerable isolated farmsteads, some of which are still tied to agriculture, others now function as part of the tourist economy. Communications, roads. The Lake District National Park is almost contained within a box of trunk routes. It is flanked to the east by the A6 road, which runs from Kendal to Penrith. The A590, which connects the M6 to Cumbria's largest town, Barrow and Furness, and the A50-92 trunk roads cut across its southern fringes, and the A66 trunk road between Penrith and Workington cuts across its northern edge. Finally, the A595 trunk road runs through the coastal plains to the west of the area, linking the A66 with the A50-92. Besides these, a few A roads penetrate the area itself, notably the A591, which runs northwestwards from Kendal to Windermere and then on to Keswick. It continues up the east side of Barsenthwaite Lake. The A591, Grasmere, Lake District was shortlisted in the 2011 Google Street View Awards in the Most Romantic Street category. The A593 and A5084 link the Ambleside and Coniston areas with the A590 to the south, whilst the A592 and A5074 similarly link Windermere with the A590. The A592 also continues northwards from Windermere to Wastwater and Penrith by way of the Kirkstone Pass. Some of those valleys which are not penetrated by A roads are served by B roads. The B5289 serves Lawton Vale and Buttermere and links via the Onister Pass with Borrowdale. The B5292 ascends the Hinlatter Pass from Lawton Vale before dropping down to Braithwaite near Keswick. The B5322 serves the Valley of St John's in the Vale, whilst Great Langdale is served by the B5343. Other valleys such as Little Langdale, Eskdale and Dunnerdale are served by minor roads. The latter connects with the former two by way of the Rinners and Harknet passes respectively. Both of these passes are known for their steep gradients and are one of the most popular climbs in the United Kingdom for cycling enthusiasts. A minor road through the Newlands Valley connects via Newlands Horse with the B5289 at Buttermere. Wastdale is served by a cul-de-sac minor road, as is Longchlaydale and the valleys at Wastwater and Kentmere. There are intricate networks of minor roads in the lower-lying southern part of the area connecting numerous communities between Kendal, Windermere and Coniston. Railways and ferries. The West Coast Main Line skirts the eastern edge of the Lake District, and the Cumbrian coastline passes through the southern and western fringes of the area. A single line, the Windermere Branch Line, penetrates from Kendal to Windermere via Staveley. Lines once served Broughton-in-Furness and Coniston, and another ran from Penrith to Cokermouth via Keswick. The track of the latter has been adopted in part for use by the improved A66 trunk road. The narrow-gauge Ravenglass and Eskdale Railway runs from Ravenglass on the west coast up Eskdale as far as Dallegarth Station near the hamlet of Boot, catering for tourists. Another heritage railway, the Lakeside and Haverthwaite Railway, runs between the two villages encompassed within its name, tourists being able to connect with the Windermere passenger ferry at Lakeside. A vehicle-carrying cable ferry, the Windermere Ferry, runs frequent services across Windermere. There are also seasonal passenger ferries on Coniston Water, Derwent Water and Wastwater. Physical geography. As the highest ground in England, Scafell Pike naturally has a very extensive view, ranging from the Mourne Mountains in Northern Ireland to Snowdonia in Wales. The Lake District takes the form of a roughly circular upland massif deeply dissected by a broadly radial pattern of major valleys whose character is largely the product of repeated glaciations over the last 2 million years. Most of these valleys display the U-shaped cross-section characteristic of glacial origin, and often contain elongate lakes occupying sizable bedrock hollows, often with tracts of relatively flat ground at their heads. Smaller lakes known as tarns occupy glacial cirques at higher elevations. It is the abundance of both which has led to the area becoming known as the Lake District. The mountains of the Lake District are also known as the Cumbrian Mountains, although this name is less frequently used than terms like the Lake District, or the Lakeland Fells. Many of the higher fells are rocky in character, while moorland predominates at lower altitudes. Vegetation cover across better drained areas includes bracken and heather, though much of the land is boggy, due to the high rainfall. Deciduous native woodland occurs on many steeper slopes below the tree line, but with native oak supplemented by extensive conifer plantations in many areas, particularly Grasdale Forest in the generally lower southern part of the area. Valleys. The principal radial valleys are those of Dunnerdale, Eskdale, Wastdale, Ennerdale, Lawton Vale and the Buttermere Valley, the Derwent Valley and Borrowdale, the valleys containing Wastwater and Wastwater, Longchlaydale, the Kendmere Valley and those radiating from the head of Windermere including Great Langdale. The valleys serve to break the mountains up into separate blocks which have been described by various authors in different ways. The most frequently encountered approach is that made popular by Alfred Wainwright, who published 7 separate area guides to the Lakeland Fells. Woodlands. Below the tree line are wooded areas, including British and European native oak woodlands and introduced softwood plantations. The woodlands provide habitats for native English wildlife. The native red squirrel is found in the Lake District and in a few other parts of England. In parts of the Lake District the rainfall is higher than in any other part of England. This gives Atlantic mosses, ferns, lichen, and liverworts the chance to grow. There is some ancient woodland in the national park. Management of the woodlands varies, some are coppiced, some pollarded, some left to grow naturally, and some provide grazing and shelter. Hills. The 4 highest mountains in the Lake District exceed 3,000 ft. These are Scafell Pike, 978 am, Scafell, 965 am, Helvellyn, 951 am and Skidad, 931 am. Northern Fells. The Northern Fells are a readily defined range of hills contained within a 13 km diameter circle between Keswick in the southwest and Coldbeck in the northeast. They culminate in the 931 am peak of Skidad. Other notable peaks are those of Blencathra and Carrock Fell. Barsenthwaite Lake occupies the valley between this massif and the Northwestern Fells. Northwestern Fells. The Northwestern Fells lie between Borrowdale and Barsenthwaite Lake to the east and Buttermere and Lawton Vale to the west. Their southernmost point is at Onister Pass. This area includes the Derwent Fells above the Newlands Valley and hills to the north, amongst which are Dale Head, Robinson. To the north stand Gressmore, highest in the range at 852 am, Grisdale Pike and the hills around the valley of Coaldale, and in the far northwest is Thornthwaite Forest and Lordseat. The fells in this area are rounded skidad slate, with few tarns and relatively few rock faces. Western Fells. The Western Fells lie between Buttermere and Wasdale, with Stye Head forming the apex of a large triangle. Ennerdale bisects the area, which consists of the High Stile Ridge north of Ennerdale, the Low Wastwater Fells in the far northwest, the Pillar Group in the southwest, and Great Gable near Stye Head. Other tops include Seaterlin, Haystacks and Kirk Fell. This area is craggy and steep, with the impressive pinnacle of Pillar Rock its showpiece. Wastwater, located in this part, is England's deepest lake. Central Fells. The Central Fells are lower in elevation than surrounding areas of fell, peaking at 762 am at high raise. They take the form of a ridge running between Derwent Water in the west and Thurmere in the east, from Keswick in the north to Langdale Pikes in the south. A spur extends southeast to Lowrig Fell above Ambleside. The central ridge running north over High Seat is exceptionally boggy. Eastern Fells. The Eastern Fells consist of a long north to south ridge the Helvellyn Range, running from Clough Head to Seat Sandal with the 3,118-foot Helvellyn at its highest point. The western slopes of these summits tend to be grassy, with rocky corries and crags on the eastern side. The Fairfield Group lies to the south of the range, and forms a similar pattern with towering rock faces and hidden valleys spilling into the Patterdale Valley. It culminates in the height of Red Screes overlooking the Kirkstone Pass. Far Eastern Fells. The Far Eastern Fells refer to all of the Lakeland Fells to the east of Wastwater and the A592 road running south to Windermere. At 8:28 am, the peak known as High Street is the highest point on a complex ridge which runs broadly north-south and overlooks the hidden valley of Wastwater to its east. In the north of this region are the lower fells of Martindale Common and Bampton Common, whilst in the south are the fells overlooking the Kendmere Valley. Further to the east, beyond Mardale and Longsleydale is Shap Fell, an extensive area consisting of high moorland, more rolling and pennine in nature than the mountains to the west. Southern Fells. The Southern Fells occupy the southwestern quarter of the Lake District. They can be regarded as comprising a northern grouping between Wasdale, Eskdale and the two Langdale valleys, a southeastern group east of Damodale and south of Little Langdale, and a southwestern group bounded by Eskdale to the north and Damodale to the east. The first group includes England's highest mountains. Scafell Pike in the centre, at 3,209 feet, and Scafell 1 mile to the southwest. Though it is slightly lower, it has a 700-foot rock face, Scafell Crag, on its northern side. It also includes the Wastwater Screes overlooking Wastdale, the Glaramara Ridge overlooking Borrowdale, the three tops of Crinkle Crags, Bowfell and Esk Pike. The core of the area is drained by the Infant River Esk. Collectively, these are some of the Lake District's most rugged hillsides. The second group, otherwise known as the Furnace Fells or Coniston Fells, have as their northern boundary the steep and narrow Harknet and Reynolds passes. The third group to the west of the Dudon includes Harter Fell and the long ridge leading over which fell to Black Combe and the sea. The south of this region consists of lower forests and knolls, with Kirkby Mere on the southern boundary. The southwestern Lake District ends near the Furnace Peninsula and Barrow and Furnace, a town which many Lake District residents rely on for basic amenities. Southeastern area. The southeastern area is the territory between Coniston Water and Windermere and east of Windermere towards Kendal and south to Lindale. There are no high summits in this area, which is mainly low hills, knolls and limestone cuestas such as Gummers How and Wishbarrow. Indeed, it rises only as high as 333 m at top O'Selside east of Coniston Water. The wide expanse of Grisdale Forest stands between the two lakes. Kendal and Morecambe Bay stand at the eastern and southern edges of the area. Lakes. Only one of the lakes in the Lake District is called by that name, Barsenthwaite Lake. All the others, such as Windermere, Coniston Water, Wastwater and Buttermere, are meres, tarns and waters, with mere being the least common and water being the most common. The major lakes and reservoirs in the national park are given below. Geology. The Lake District's geology is very complex but well studied. A granite batholith beneath the area is responsible for this upland massif, its relatively low density causing the area to be buoyed up. The granite can be seen at the surface as the Ennerdale, Skidad, Carrock Fell, Eskdale and Shap granites. Broadly speaking, the area can be divided into three bands, the divisions between which run southwest to northeast. Generally speaking, the rocks become younger from northwest to southeast. The northwestern band is composed of early to mid-Ordovician sedimentary rocks, largely mudstones and siltstones of marine origin. Together they comprise the Skidad group and include the rocks traditionally known as the Skidad slates. Their friability generally leads to mountains with relatively smooth slopes such as Skidad itself. The central band is a mix of volcanic and sedimentary rocks of mid to late Ordovician age comprising the lavas and tuffs of the Borrowdale volcanic group, erupted as the former Iapicus Ocean was subducted beneath what is now the Scottish border during the Caledonian orogeny. The northern central peaks, such as Great Rig, were produced by considerable lava flows. These lava eruptions were followed by a series of pyroclastic eruptions which produced a series of calderas, one of which includes present-day Scafell Pike. These pyroclastic rocks give rise to the craggy landscapes typical of the Central Fells. The southeastern band comprises the mudstones and wax of the Windermere supergroup, and which includes the rocks of the Dent, Stockdale, Tranirth, Coniston and Kendal groups. These are generally a little less resistant to erosion than the rocks sequenced to the north and underlie much of the lower landscapes around Coniston and Windermere. Later intrusions have formed individual outcrops of igneous rock in each of these groups. Around the edges of these Ordovician and Silurian rocks on the northern, eastern and southern fringes of the area is a semi-continuous outcrop of Carboniferous limestone seen most spectacularly at places like Wishbarrow Scar and Scout Scar. Climate. The Lake District's location on the northwest coast of England, coupled with its mountainous geography, makes it the dampest part of England. The UK Met Office reports average annual precipitation of more than 2,000 mm, but with very large local variation. Although the entire region receives above-average rainfall, there is a wide disparity between the amount of rainfall in the western and eastern lakes, as the Lake District experiences relief rainfall. Seathwaite in Borrowdale is the wettest inhabited place in England with an average of 3,300 mm of rain a year, while nearby Sprinkling Tarn is even wetter, recording over 5,000 mm per year. By contrast, Keswick, at the end of Borrowdale receives 1,470 mm every year, and Penrith only 870 mm. March to June tend to be the driest months, with October to January the wettest, but at low levels there is relatively little difference between months. Although sheltered valleys experience gales on an average of only 5 days a year, the Lake District is generally very windy with the coastal areas having 20 days of gales, and the fell tops around 100 days of gales per year. The maritime climate means that the Lake District experiences relatively moderate temperature variations through the year. Mean temperature in the valleys ranges from about 3 degrees Celsius in January to around 15 degrees Celsius in July. The relatively low height of most of the fells means that, while snow is expected during the winter, they can be free of snow at any time of the year. Normally, significant snowfall only occurs between November and April. On average, snow falls on Helvellyn 67 days per year. During the year, valleys typically experience 20 days with snow falling, a further 200 wet days, and 145 dry days. Hill fog is common at any time of year, and the fells average only around 2.5 hours of sunshine per day, increasing to around 4.1 hours per day on the coastal plains. Wildlife. The Lake District is home to a plethora of wildlife, due to its range of varied topography, lakes and forests. It provides a home for the red squirrel and colonies of sundew and butterwort, two of the few carnivorous plants native to Britain. The Lake District is a major sanctuary for the red squirrel and has the largest population in England. The Lake District is home to a range of bird species, and the RSPB maintain a reserve in Wastwater. England's only nesting pair of golden eagles can be found in the Lake District. The female golden eagle has not been seen since 2004, although the male still remains. Conservationists believe he is now the only resident golden eagle in England. Following recolonization attempts, a pair of ospreys nested in the Lake District for the time in over 150 years near Seathwaite Lake during 2001. Ospreys now frequently migrate north from Africa in the spring to nest in the Lake District, and a total of 23 chicks have fledged in the lakes since 2001. Another bird species to have had recolonization attempts is the red kite, who have a population approximately 90 in the dense forest areas near Grisdale as of 2012. Conservationists hope the reintroduction will create a large red kite population in the Lake District and in northwest England, where the red kite population is low. Other bird species resident to the Lake District include the buzzard, dipper, peregrine and raven. Seasonal birds include the ring-ouzel and the redstart. The lakes of the Lake District support 3 rare and endangered species of fish, the vendace, which can be found only in Derwent water and until 2008 in Seathwaite Lake. Vendace have struggled in recent years with naturally occurring algae becoming a threat and the lakes gradually getting warmer in temperature. Vendace have been moved to higher lakes on a number of occasions to preserve the species, notably in 2005 and 2011. The lakes are also home to 2 other rare species, the shelly, which lives in Brothers Water, Wastwater, red tarn and Ullswater, and the Arctic char, which can be found in Buttermere, Coniston Water, Crummock Water, Ennerdale Water, Wastwater, Low Wastwater, Thirlmere, Wastwater, and Windermere. In recent years, some important changes have been made to fisheries bylaws covering the northwest region of England, to help protect some of the rarest fish species. In 2002, the Environment Agency introduced a new fisheries bylaw, banning the use of all freshwater fish as live or dead bait in 14 of the lakes in the Lake District. Anglers not complying with the new bylaw can face fines of up to £2,500. There are 14 lakes in the Lake District which are affected. These are, Seathwaite Lake, Brothers Water, Buttermere, Coniston Water, Crummock Water, Derwent Water, Ennerdale Water, Wastwater, Low Wastwater, Red Tarn, Thirlmere, Ullswater, Wastwater and Windermere. the lakes and waters of the Lake District do not naturally support as many species of fish as other similar habitats in the south of the country and elsewhere in Europe. Some fish that do thrive there are particularly at risk from introduction of new species. The introduction of non-native fish can lead to the predation of the native fish fauna or competition for food. There is also the risk of disease being introduced, which can further threaten native populations. In some cases, the introduced species can disturb the environment so much that it becomes unsuitable for particular fish. For example, a major problem has been found with ruff. This non-native fish has now been introduced into a number of lakes in recent years. It is known that ruff eat the eggs of vendace, which are particularly vulnerable because of their long incubation period. This means that they are susceptible to predators for up to 120 days. The eggs of other fish, for example roach, are only at risk for as little as 3 days. Economy, agriculture and forestry. Farming, and in particular sheep farming, has been the major industry in the region since Roman times. The breed most closely associated with the area is the tough Herdwick, with rough and Swaledale sheep also common. Sheep farming remains important both for the economy of the region and for preserving the landscape which visitors want to see. Features such as dry stone walls, for example, are there as a result of sheep farming. Some land is also used for silage and dairy farming. The area was badly affected by the outbreak of foot and mouth disease across the United Kingdom in 2001. The outbreak started in Surrey in February, but had spread to Cumbria by end of March. Thousands of sheep, include the native Herdwick which graze on the fell sides across the district, were destroyed. In replacing the sheep, one problem to overcome was that many of the lost sheep were heft, that is, they knew their part of the unfenced fell and did not stray, with this knowledge being passed between generations. With all the sheep lost at once, this knowledge has to be relearned and some of the fells have had discrete electric fences strung across them for a period of 5 years, to allow the sheep to re-hef. At the time of the outbreak, worries existed about the future of certain species of sheep such as Ryland and Herdwick in the district, however these fears have been allayed and sheep now occupy the district in abundance. Forestry has also assumed greater importance over the course of the last century with the establishment of extensive conifer plantations around in Latter Pass, in Ennerdale and at Grisdale Forest amongst other places. There are extensive plantations of non-native pine trees. Industry, with its wealth of rock types and their abundance in the landscape, mining and quarrying have long been significant activities in the Lake District economy. In Neolithic times, the Lake District was a major source of stone axes, examples of which have been found all over Britain. The primary site, on the slopes of the Langdale Pikes, is sometimes described as a stone axe factory of the Langdale axe industry. Some of the earliest stone circles in Britain are connected with this industry. Mining, particularly of copper, lead, barite, graphite and slate, was historically a major Lakeland industry, mainly from the 16th century to the 19th century. Coppice woodland was used extensively to provide charcoal for smelting. Some mining still takes place today. For example, slate mining continues at the Onister mines, at the top of Onister Pass. Abandoned mine workings can be found on fell sites throughout the district. The locally mined graphite led to the development of the pencil industry, especially around Keswick. In the middle of the 19th century, half the world textile industry's bobbin supply came from the Lake District area. Over the past century, however, tourism has grown rapidly to become the area's primary source of income. Development of tourism, early visitors to the Lake District, who travelled for the education and pleasure of the journey, include Celeophans who in 1698 undertook a journey the length of England, including riding through Kendal and over Kirkstone Pass into Patterdale. Her experiences and impressions were published in her book Great Journey to Newcastle and Cornwall. As I walked down at this place I was walled on both sides by those inaccessible high rocky barren hills which hang over a near unregistered trademark S-head in some places and appear very terrible. And from them springs many little currents of water from the sides and clefts which trickle down to some lower part where it runs swiftly over the stones and shelves in the way. which makes a pleasant rush and murmuring noise and like a snowball is increased by each spring trickling down on either side of those hills, and so descends into the bottoms which are a moorish ground in which in many places the waters stand, and so form some of those lakes as it did here. In 1724, Daniel Defoe published the first volume of A Tour Through the Whole Island of Great Britain. He commented on Westmorland that it was the wildest, most barren and frightful of any that I have passed over in England, or even Wales itself. The west side, which borders on Cumberland, is indeed bounded by a chain of almost unpassable mountains which, in the language of the country, are called fells. Towards the end of the 18th century, the area was becoming more popular with travellers. This was partly a result of wars in continental Europe, restricting the possibility of travel there. In 1778 Father Thomas West produced a guide to the lakes, which began the era of modern tourism. West listed stations as viewpoints where tourists could enjoy the best views of the landscape, being encouraged to appreciate the formal qualities of the landscape and to apply aesthetic values. At some of these stations, buildings were erected to help this process. The remains of Claife Station can be visited today. William Wordsworth published his Guide to the Lakes in 1810, and by 1835 it had reached its fifth edition, now called A Guide Through the District of the Lakes in the North of England. This book was particularly influential in popularising the region. Wordsworth's favourite valley was Dummerdale or the Dudon Valley nestling in the southwest of the Lake District. The railways led to another expansion in tourism. The Kendal and Windermere Railway was the first to penetrate the Lake District, reaching Kendal in 1846 and Windermere in 1847. The line to Coniston opened in 1848. The line from Penrith through Keswick to Cokermouth in 1865. And the line to Lakeside at the foot of Windermere in 1869. The railways, built with traditional industry in mind, brought with them a huge increase in the number of visitors, thus contributing to the growth of the tourism industry. Railway services were supplemented by steamer boats on the major lakes of Wastwater, Windermere, Coniston Water, and Derwentwater. The growth in tourist numbers continued into the age of the motor car, when railways began to be closed or run down. The formation of the Lake District National Park in 1951 recognized the need to protect the Lake District environment from excessive commercial or industrial exploitation, preserving that which visitors come to see, without any restriction on the movement of people into and around the district. The M6 motorway helped bring traffic to the lakes, passing up its eastern flank. The narrow roads present a challenge for traffic flow and, from the 1960s, certain areas have been very congested. Whilst the roads and railways provided easier access to the area, many people were drawn to the lakes by the publication of the pictorial Guide to the Lakeland Fells by Alfred Wainwright. First published between 1952 and 1965, these books provided detailed information on 214 peaks across the region, with carefully hand-drawn maps and panoramas, and also stories and asides which add to the color of the area. They are still used by many visitors to the area as guides for walking excursions, with the ultimate goal of bagging the complete list of Wainwright's. The famous guides are being revised by Chris Jesty to reflect changes, mainly in valley access and paths. Since the early 1960s, the National Park Authority has employed rangers to help cope with increasing tourism and development, the first being John Wyatt, who has since written a number of guidebooks. He was joined 2 years later by a second, and since then the number of rangers has been rising. The area has also become associated with writer Beatrix Potter. A number of tourists visit to see her family home, with particularly large numbers coming from Japan. Tourism has now become the park's major industry, with about 12 million visitors each year, mainly from the UK's larger settlements, China, Japan, Spain, Germany and the US. Windermere Lake steamers are Cumbria's most popular charging tourist attraction with about 1.35 million paying customers each year, and the local economy is dependent upon tourists. The negative impact of tourism has been seen, however. Soil erosion, caused by walking, is now a significant problem, with millions of pounds being spent to protect overused paths. In 2006, 2 tourist information centres in the national park were closed. Cultural tourism is becoming an increasingly important part of the wider tourist industry. The Lake District's links with a wealth of artists and writers and its strong history of providing summer theatre performances in the Old Blue Box of Century Theatre are strong attractions for visiting tourists. The tradition of theatre is carried on by venues such as Theatre by the Lake in Keswick with its summer season of 6 plays and repertoire, Christmas and Easter productions, and the many literature, film, mountaineering, jazz and creative arts festivals, such as the Kendall Mountain Festival and the Keswick Mountain Festival. Gastronomy: the Lake District has been regarded as one of the best places to eat in Britain. The region has 3 Michelin star restaurants, Lancashire, Holbeck Gill and the Samling in Ambleside. In addition, Cumbria has more microbreweries than any other county in Britain, and together with Jennings breweries supply a variety of ales to pubs and restaurants throughout the region. Literature and art: the Lake District is intimately associated with English literature in the 18th and 19th centuries. Thomas Gray was the first to bring the region to attention, when he wrote a journal of his grand tour in 1769, but it was William Wordsworth whose poems were most famous and influential. Wordsworth's poem I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, inspired by the sight of daffodils on the shores of Wastwater, remains one of the most famous in the English language. Out of his long life of 80 years, 60 were spent amid its lakes and mountains, first as a schoolboy at Hawkshead, and afterwards living in Grasmere and Riddle Mount. Wordsworth, Coleridge and Southey became known as the Lake Poets. The poet and his wife lie buried in the churchyard of Grasmere, and very near to them are the remains of Hartley Coleridge, who himself lived for many years in Keswick, Ambleside and Grasmere. Robert Southey, the poet laureate and friend of Wordsworth, was a resident of Keswick for 40 years, and was buried in Crosthwaite churchyard. Samuel Taylor Coleridge lived for some time in Keswick, and also with the Wordsworths at Grasmere. From 1807 to 1815 John Wilson lived at Windermere. Thomas de Quincey spent the greater part of the years 1809 to 1828 at Grasmere, in the first cottage which Wordsworth had inhabited. Ambleside, or its environs, was also the place of residence both of Thomas Arnold, who spent there the vacations of the last 10 years of his life, and of Harriet Martineau, who built herself a house there in 1845. At Keswick, Mrs. Lynn Linton was born, in 1822. Brantwood, a house beside Coniston Water, was the home of John Ruskin during the last years of his life. His assistant W. G. Collingwood, the author, artist and antiquarian, lived nearby, and wrote Thorstein of the Mere, set in the Norse period. In addition to these residents or natives of the Lake District, a variety of other poets and writers made visits to the Lake District or were bound by ties of friendship with those already mentioned above. These include Percy B. Shelley, Sir Walter Scott, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Arthur Hugh Clough, Henry Crabb Robinson, Conversation Sharp, Thomas Carlyle, John Keats, Lord Tennyson, Matthew Arnold, Felicia Hemans, and Gerald Massey. During the early 20th century, the children's author Beatrix Potter was in residence at Hilltop Farm, setting many of her famous Peter Rabbit books in the Lake District. Her life was made into a biopic film, starring Rena copyright Zellweger and Ewan McGregor. Arthur Ransom lived in several areas of the Lake District, and set 5 of his Swallows and Amazons series of books, published between 1930 and 1947, in a fictionalized Lake District setting. So did Geoffrey Treece with his 5 Black Banner School stories, starting with No Boats on Bannermere. The novelist Sir Hugh Walpole lived at Brackenburn on the lower slopes of Catballs overlooking Derwent Water from 1924 until his death in 1941. Whilst living at Brackenburn he wrote the Herries Chronicle, detailing the history of a fictional Cumbrian family over 2 centuries. The noted author and poet Norman Nicholson came from the Southwest Lakes, living and writing about Milham in the 20th century. He was known as the last of the Lake Poets and came close to becoming the poet laureate. The Lakes has been an inspiration for many notable artists. Some of the most famous artists to depict the region in their work have been Alfred Heaton Cooper and William Heaton Cooper. Writer and author Melvyn Bragg was brought up in the region and has used it as the setting for some of his work, such as his novel A Time to Dance, later turned into a television drama. The Lake District has been the setting for crime novels by Reginald Hill, Val MacDiarmid and Martin Edwards. The region is also a recurring theme in Ernest Hemingway's 1926 novella The Torrents of Spring and features prominently in Ian McEwan's Amsterdam, which won the 1998 Booker Prize. The Lake District is mentioned in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Elizabeth Bennet looks forward to a holiday there with her aunt and uncle and is excessively disappointed upon learning they cannot travel that far. Film director Ken Russell lived in the Keswick-Borrowdale area until 2007 and used it in films such as Tommy and Marla. The Lake District is the setting for the 1977 Richard Adams novel The Plague Dogs. Adams' knowledge of the area offers the reader a precise view of the natural beauty of the Lake District. Some students of Arthurian lore identify the Lake District with the Grail Kingdom of Listeners. The former Keswick School of Industrial Art at Keswick was started by Canon Rawnsley, a friend of John Ruskin. Nomenclature: a number of words and phrases are local to the Lake District and are part of the Cumbrian dialect, though many are shared by other northern dialects. These include, fella Euro from Old Norse fjallr, brought to England by Viking invaders and close to modern Norwegian eel and Swedish occurrence ll meaning mountain, how a Euro place name from the Old Norse haugr meaning hill, knoll, or mound, Tana Euro a word that has been taken to mean a small lake situated in a corrie, a local phrase for any small pool of water. The word is derived from the Old Norse, Norwegian and Swedish word tjernstjar currency rn, meaning small lake, Yantanterarina Euro the name for a system of sheep counting which was traditionally used in the Lake District. Though now rare, it is still used by some and taught in local schools. Hef, the home territory of a flock of sheep. See also: Geology of England, Geology of the United Kingdom, references. Further reading: Gannon, P. Rock Trails Lakeland, A Hill Walker's Guide to the Geology and Scenery, 2008, Pesta Press, ISBN 978-1-906095-15-4, Hollingsworth, S. The Geology of the Lake District, A Review, Proc. Geologists Assoc, 65 1954, Moseley, F. Geology of the Lake District, Yorkshire Geologic, Lake District Tours, a collection of travel writings and guidebooks in the Romantic era in 6 vols, edited by Tamara Oda, Eureka Press, 2008. External links: Lake District National Park Authority, Lake District at DMOZ, Lake District National Park Travel Guide from Wiki Voyage.